Adrian Voss built an empire on fear, blood, and absolute control. He owned half the city, commanded armies of loyal men, and crushed anyone who dared cross him. But on the night his wife vanished, he discovered the terrible truth. Every brick of his kingdom was held together by the woman he'd ignored for 7 years. 21 missed calls, 21 chances to save everything. Now she's gone, and she's taking it all with her. If you want to see how a ghost can destroy a king, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments. Let me see how far this story travels. The silk sheets cost more than most people earned in a month, but Adrian Voss barely noticed them anymore. Luxury had a way of becoming invisible when you had enough of it. He lay sprawled across the king-sized bed in the Marquis Hotel's presidential suite, one arm draped over Isabella Chen's bare shoulder, the other reaching for his phone on the nightstand. 21 missed calls. All from the same number, all from home. You gonna answer that? Isabella's voice carried that particular brand of irritation that expensive mistresses perfected, just sharp enough to be heard, never quite sharp enough to be dismissed. Adrian glanced at the screen, then set the phone face down. It's nothing. Nothing calls 21 times. My wife calls 21 times. He reached for the whiskey on the nightstand, the ice long since melted into weak amber water. Probably wants to discuss the fundraiser seating chart again, or which shade of white the fucking tablecloths should be. Isabella sat up, pulling the sheet around herself with practiced modesty that fooled neither of them. At 32, she was exactly half his age, with the kind of calculated beauty that came from knowing your face was a business asset. You know what's funny about powerful men? I'm sure you're about to tell me. You all think you're invincible until your wife gets bored. Adrian laughed, but it came out harsher than he intended. Alara doesn't get bored. She doesn't get anything. That's the point of her. It wasn't entirely fair, and some buried part of him knew it. But fairness was a luxury he'd abandoned somewhere around his third kill, back when he was still young enough to feel bad about it. Alara Voss, née Collins, though nobody remembered her maiden name anymore, was exactly what she was supposed to be. Quiet, elegant. Invisible when necessary, presentable when required. She showed up to charity galas in tasteful gowns, smiled for photographers, and never once asked where the money actually came from. She was, in every measurable way, the perfect mob wife, which made the 21 calls strange. Adrian poured himself another drink, trying to ignore the small knot forming in his chest. Alara didn't call. Not like this. In 7 years of marriage, she'd developed a kind of silence that was almost architectural, something you could build a life around without ever having to acknowledge its presence. His phone buzzed again. 22. Jesus Christ, Isabella muttered. Just answer it. She'll leave a message if it's important. But even as he said it, Adrian found himself staring at the phone. The screen lit up with each buzz, casting pale blue light across the dark hotel room. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sprawled below them like a kingdom he'd conquered one bloody block at a time. From up here, it looked clean, orderly. Nothing like the mess of power and violence that actually held it together. The buzzing stopped, then started again immediately. 23. That's not normal, Isabella said quietly. Adrian drained his glass and stood, suddenly restless. He walked to the window, phone still clutched in his hand. The Marquis Hotel sat in the heart of the financial district, surrounded by towers of glass and steel that turned the night sky into a checkerboard of lit and dark windows. Somewhere down there, in one of those buildings, someone was laundering his money. In another, someone was cooking his books. In a third, someone was making sure the right judges got their envelopes on time. The empire ran like clockwork because Adrian Voss made it run like clockwork. Didn't it? His phone went dark. Silent. The sudden absence of buzzing felt worse than the noise. I should go, he said, already reaching for his pants. Isabella made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sigh. Now you're worried. I'm not worried. I'm being practical. He found his shirt draped over a chair, wrinkled beyond saving. She's probably locked herself out. Or the housekeeper quit. Or something's actually wrong, and you ignored her all night while you were here with me. Adrian turned to look at her. In the dim light from the window, Isabella's face had lost its careful seduction. She looked tired, maybe even sympathetic, which was somehow worse. Don't, he said. Don't what? Don't pretend this is about morality. You knew what this was. I'm not pretending anything. She pulled her knees up to her chest, suddenly looking younger than her 32 years. But I've been the other woman enough times to know what a wife sounds like when she's done. Alara isn't done. Alara doesn't do done. 23 calls, Adrian. He finished dressing in silence, his movements sharp and irritated. The tuxedo jacket from dinner, some tech mogul's birthday party where he'd spent 3 hours pretending to give a damn about cryptocurrency, hung on the bathroom door. He grabbed it, checked the inside pocket for his wallet and keys, and stopped. His wedding ring. He'd taken it off and left it in the pocket. He always did when he met Isabella. Some vestigial sense of propriety that made no logical sense but felt necessary anyway. Adrian stared at the gold band for a long moment, then slipped it back on. You're a real piece of work, Isabella said from the bed. So I've been told. She's going to leave you eventually. You know that, right? She's not going anywhere. Adrian opened the door, paused. Alara doesn't leave. She doesn't fight. She doesn't make scenes. That's why I married her. Then why are you running home? He didn't have an answer for that. The elevator ride down felt longer than it should have. Adrian checked his phone again. No new calls, no messages. The silence sat in his stomach like bad food. Through the elevator's mirrored walls, he caught sight of himself. 64 years old, silver hair still thick enough to be worth vanity. The kind of tailored suit that communicated power before he ever opened his mouth. He looked like what he was, a man who'd built an empire from nothing and refused to apologize for the bodies it took to get there. But something in his reflection looked wrong, off balance. The lobby of the Marquis was designed to intimidate, all black marble and gold fixtures, with enough space to make visitors feel small. At 2 a.m, it was nearly empty except for the night staff, who knew better than to make eye contact when Adrian Voss walked past. His car was waiting at the valet stand, a black Mercedes S-Class that cost more than most houses. Daniel, his driver, stood beside it, phone pressed to his ear. When he saw Adrian approaching, his expression shifted into something uncomfortable. Sir, Daniel said, ending his call abruptly. I was just about to come up. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong exactly. I've just been trying to reach you. Adrian's jaw tightened. How many times? Sir? How many times did you call? Daniel glanced at his phone. 4, maybe 5. Look, it's probably nothing, but what? Mrs. Voss's car isn't at the house. The knot in Adrian's chest pulled tighter. What do you mean it's not at the house? I drove past about an hour ago, just doing my usual security check. Her Range Rover wasn't in the garage, and the house was dark, all the lights off. Adrian checked his watch, 2:17 a.m. Alara was asleep by 10 every night, without fail. She treated sleep like a religion, one of her many small rituals that made up the careful architecture of her days. Maybe she went out, he said, hearing how stupid it sounded even as the words left his mouth. At 2 a.m, Mrs. Voss? No, not Alara. Alara didn't go out. She barely left the house except for her charity work and the occasional social obligation she couldn't avoid. She'd built an entire life around staying invisible. Take me home, Adrian said. The drive should have taken 20 minutes. Daniel made it in 12, the Mercedes cutting through empty streets with the kind of speed that only came from knowing exactly where the cops wouldn't be. Adrian spent the entire ride staring at his phone, willing it to ring. It didn't. The Voss estate sat in Blackwood Hills, where old money built walls high enough to keep out new money's questions. Adrian had bought the property 8 years ago, back when he was still pretending his fortune came from legitimate real estate ventures. The house itself was a modernist masterpiece, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows, designed by some architect whose name he could never remember. It looked like a mausoleum in the dark. Daniel pulled through the gate, which was open, another wrong detail, and stopped in the circular driveway. Every window was black. No lights in the entryway, the living room, the upstairs bedrooms, nothing. Want me to come in? Daniel asked. No, wait here. Adrian got out of the car, his heart doing something strange and arrhythmic in his chest. The front door was unlocked. Also wrong. Alara was obsessive about security, checking and rechecking locks like a woman who understood exactly what kind of man she'd married. He pushed the door open. Alara! His voice echoed through the entryway, bouncing off marble floors and vaulted ceilings. The house smelled clean and empty, like a hotel room waiting for guests who'd never arrive. Adrian found the light switch and the chandelier blazed to life overhead. Everything looked normal. Expensive furniture and careful arrangement, abstract art on the walls that cost more than it was worth. A side table with fresh flowers, orchids, Alara's favorite, in a crystal vase. But something felt off. Not wrong, exactly. Just absent. Alara! Louder this time. He moved through the house, turning on lights as he went. The living room, empty. The kitchen, spotless. No dishes in the sink. No coffee cup waiting for morning. The study where Alara spent her afternoons doing whatever it was she did, he'd never asked, never cared to know, was dark and silent. Adrian took the stairs 2 at a time, his breath coming faster now. The master bedroom door was open. The bed was made. Not just made perfectly, with hospital corners and pillows arranged in precise symmetry, like nobody had slept there at all. Her closet door stood open. Adrian walked over, already knowing what he'd find. Empty. Not completely empty. Some clothes remained, the kind of basic items that could be replaced easily. But all of her favorite pieces, the things she actually wore, the designer dresses she'd spent hours choosing for various events, gone. Her shoes. The expensive section of the rack was bare. Her jewelry box on the dresser. The good pieces missing. The costume jewelry left behind like it didn't matter. Adrian stood in the middle of the bedroom, his mind trying to catch up to what his eyes were seeing. Alara had left. Not in anger, not in a rage, but methodically, carefully, the same way she did everything, taking what mattered, leaving what didn't. His phone buzzed in his pocket. For a wild moment he thought it might be her, but the screen showed Marcus Chen, his right-hand man, the person who kept the actual business running while Adrian played king. "What?" Adrian answered. "We have a problem." Marcus's voice had the tight, controlled quality of a man trying not to panic. A big fucking problem. "Unless someone's dead, it can wait." "The accounts are locked." Adrian's brain stuttered. "What accounts?" "All of them. Every offshore account, every shell company, every safety deposit box. I've been trying to access funds for the Chicago payment and everything's frozen. Passwords don't work. Security questions don't work. It's like we've been completely locked out of our own money." The room tilted slightly. Adrian sat down on the edge of the bed, his free hand gripping the mattress. "That's impossible," he said quietly. "I'm looking at the screens right now. Every single account shows access denied. I called our contact at Cayman First National. He's never heard of half these accounts. Says they don't exist in the system." "They exist. I've seen the statements." "Well, someone's made them disappear." Adrian's mind raced through possibilities. A hack, a federal investigation, some rival family making a move, but none of it made sense. The accounts were layered through so many shells and intermediaries that even he sometimes lost track of how the money flowed. "Get Chen on it," he said, meaning Marcus's cousin who handled their tech security. "Have him trace where the access is coming from." "Already did. He says whoever locked us out knew exactly what they were doing, professional level, maybe government level." "Fuck." Adrian stood, started pacing. "What about the political accounts? The ones we use for the city council payments?" "Frozen." "The pension fund we control?" "Frozen." "The fucking petty cash accounts?" Marcus paused. "Those too." Through the phone, Adrian could hear other voices in the background. His crew, probably gathered at the warehouse they used as unofficial headquarters. They sounded worried. When his crew sounded worried, people usually ended up dead. "There's more," Marcus said. "How could there possibly be more?" Judge Harrison called. Says he's reconsidering his position on the Delgado case. Adrian's blood went cold. Judge Thomas Harrison had been on the payroll for 6 years, a reliable vote whenever they needed legal trouble to disappear. The Delgado case, a murder charge against one of their enforcers, was supposed to be dismissed next week. Reconsidering how? He said, and I quote, "Tell Mr. Voss I no longer find his financial incentives compelling." That's not how this works. He takes the money, he plays along, that's the arrangement. Well, apparently the arrangement changed. And it's not just him. Councilman Rhodes hasn't returned my calls. Neither has Commissioner Delacroix or Captain Martinez. It's like everyone who used to take our calls has suddenly gone deaf. Adrian walked to the bedroom window, looking out over the manicured grounds. In the distance, he could see the city lights, his kingdom sprawling out in all directions. Except it wasn't his kingdom, was it? Not if the accounts were frozen. Not if the politicians were backing out. Not if... Sir? Marcus's voice pulled him back. What do you want me to do? I'll call you back. He hung up before Marcus could protest, then stood there in the empty bedroom, his wife's absence suddenly taking on new dimensions. The timing was too perfect. Adrian walked back to Elara's closet, really looking this time. She'd taken her clothes, her jewelry, her personal items, but she'd left everything that connected her to him: photos, gifts, the Cartier watch he'd given her for their anniversary. It wasn't the departure of someone running scared. It was the departure of someone who didn't need his world anymore. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to Elara's number. His thumb hovered over the call button. What would he even say? Come home, where are you, please? He'd never said please to anyone in 30 years. Adrian hit call. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then it connected, and he heard silence. Not dead air, the active silence of someone on the other end, listening. Elara, he said. More silence. I know you're there. I can hear you breathing. Can you? Her voice was calm, quiet, exactly as it always was. But something underneath had changed, some fundamental shift in tone that made his skin prickle. Where are you? Away. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting. Adrian forced himself to breathe slowly, to stay calm. Anger never worked with Elara. Nothing worked with Elara, because she never gave him anything to push against. But this was different. Come home, he said. We can talk about whatever's bothering you. She laughed. Actually laughed, a soft sound that made something in his chest crack. You think I'm bothered, Adrian? The accounts are frozen. My contacts have gone silent. You're gone. So yes, I think something's bothering you. The accounts are frozen because I froze them. Your contacts are silent because I withdrew the payments. And I'm gone because I chose to leave. The words hit him like physical blows. That's impossible. You don't have access to what? The accounts? The payment schedules? The network of bribes and payoffs that keep your empire running? Her voice remained perfectly level, like she was discussing the weather. Adrian, I built that network. Every account, every shell company, every political payment. I created the systems. I maintained them. I protected them. For 7 years, I've been the foundation of everything you think you built. His mind rejected the information, even as part of him recognized the truth in it. All those afternoons in her study, all those quiet hours she spent on her computer while he was out playing crime lord. He thought she was shopping, planning charity events, doing whatever useless things mob wives did to pass the time. You're lying, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Am I? Check your phone, the file labeled Empire. Adrian pulled the phone away from his ear, navigating to his files. There it was. A document he'd never seen before, labeled exactly as she'd said. He opened it. Page after page of account numbers, passwords, political contacts, payment schedules, shell company structures, everything. The entire skeletal structure of his organization laid out in meticulous detail. And at the top of every page, created and maintained by E.V. Elara Voss. How long? He asked quietly. How long what? How long have you been planning this? Planning? I've been planning since the day we met, Adrian. You needed someone to make your empire look legitimate. I needed a way out of my father's house. We both got what we wanted. I gave you everything. You gave me nothing. Her voice finally showed emotion. Not anger, but something colder. You gave me a mansion I never wanted, jewelry I never wore, and a life I never asked for. What you didn't give me was attention, respect, basic fucking acknowledgement that I existed. Adrian sat down on the bed again, his legs suddenly unreliable. The 21 calls were 21 chances. 21 opportunities for you to choose me over whatever meaningless thing was keeping you occupied. But you didn't. You never do. I was in a meeting. You were in a hotel room with Isabella Chen, room 2407 at the Marquis. You've been seeing her for 8 months. Before her, it was Rachel Liu. Before Rachel, it was Sophie Moreau. Should I keep going? I have files on all of them. The detailed knowledge should have scared him. Instead, all he felt was a strange numbness spreading through his chest. What do you want? He asked. I wanted a husband who would answer his phone. But that ship sailed around call number 12. I mean now. What do you want now? The pause stretched out long enough that Adrian thought she might have hung up. Then, I want you to understand what powerlessness feels like. I want you to watch everything you built crumble. And then I want you to make a choice. What choice? In 2 weeks, you're going to confess to the murder of David Castellano. Adrian's blood turned to ice. David Castellano had been a rival boss, killed 5 years ago in what was officially ruled a random mugging gone wrong. In reality, Adrian had orchestrated the hit personally. It was one of the few crimes he'd ever gotten his hands directly dirty with. If I do that, I go to prison for life. Yes, Alara said simply. And if I don't? Then you lose everything, not just the accounts, everything, your political protection, your crew's loyalty, your reputation, your freedom to operate. I'll dismantle your empire piece by piece until you're nothing but an old man with a history of violence and no safety net to catch you. You can't do that. I already am. The accounts are just the beginning. Check your phone again. The file labeled Dominoes. He did. The new file showed a timeline, dates and actions, each one designed to strip away another piece of his power. Judge Harrison withdrawing support. Commissioner Delacroix launching an investigation. Captain Martinez feeding information to federal prosecutors. Every domino carefully arranged, ready to fall, all scheduled for the next 2 weeks. Why? Adrian asked, his voice rough. Why go through all this? Why not just leave? Because leaving wouldn't teach you anything. You just find another quiet woman to marry and ignore, another Isabella to entertain you, another empire to build on someone else's invisible labor. She paused. I want you to understand what I was, what I am, and what you lost. Ilara, you have 2 weeks. Confess to Castellano's murder or watch your world end. Your choice. The line went dead. Adrian sat in the empty bedroom, phone clutched in his hand, and finally understood what the knot in his chest had been trying to tell him all night. His wife hadn't left him. She'd declared war, and he was already losing. His phone rang again. Marcus. Did you fix it? Adrian answered. Fix it? It's getting worse. The Chicago crew says they never got their payment. They're threatening to pull their contract. The transport guys in Nevada are holding our shipment hostage until they get paid. And I just got word that our warehouse on 5th got raided by the feds. What? Someone tipped them off. They found 3 kilos of product and about 50 grand in cash. The kind of amount that makes headlines but doesn't actually hurt us. It's like someone wanted to send a message, Adrian finished quietly. Yeah, what the hell is happening? Adrian looked around the empty bedroom, at the gaps where Alara's things used to be. My wife is happening? Sir? Get everyone to the warehouse, all the lieutenants, all the crew leads. We're going to war. With who? With a ghost. He hung up and sat there in the silence, surrounded by the trappings of a life he'd thought he understood. The $7,000 mattress felt like concrete. The hand-painted wallpaper looked like a prison cell. The view of his city through floor-to-ceiling windows suddenly seemed less like a kingdom and more like a target range. 21 calls. 21 chances to answer. He'd missed every single one. And now the woman he'd married to make his empire look legitimate was burning that empire to the ground, with a precision that suggested she understood its architecture better than he ever had. Adrian Voss had built an empire on blood and fear, but Alara Voss had built the foundation it stood on, and she was about to teach him the difference. The warehouse on Pier 17 had seen better days, back when it actually stored legitimate cargo instead of serving as a meeting place for men who solved problems with violence. Adrian stood at the head of the long metal table, his reflection distorted in its scratched surface, and looked at the faces of the people who'd helped him build his empire. 12 men, 12 different specialties: money laundering, drug distribution, political corruption, enforcement, logistics, legal maneuvering. Together, they made up the machinery that kept Adrian Voss on top, except the machinery was breaking down. "Run it again," Adrian said to Marcus, who stood at the other end of the table with a laptop open. Marcus's fingers moved across the keyboard, his expression getting darker with each screen. Account 7743 in the Caymans, frozen. Account 2891 in Switzerland, access denied. The Luxembourg holdings, password changed, security questions changed, recovery email changed. It's the same pattern across all 47 primary accounts. What about the backup accounts? This from Vincent Calabrese, who handled their East Coast operations. He was old school mob, the kind of guy who still wore pinky rings and genuinely believed in Omerta. Also frozen, Marcus said. And before you ask about the emergency reserves, those too. How much are we talking? Asked Sarah Lim, their money laundering expert. She was the only woman in the room, a detail she'd weaponized into leverage more times than Adrian could count. Total? Somewhere north of 400 million. The room went silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. That's not possible, Vincent finally said. Nobody has that kind of access, not even you, boss. Adrian had been thinking the same thing for the past 3 hours. Apparently someone does. Your wife. Marcus said it flatly, without judgment, which somehow made it worse. My wife, Adrian confirmed. Vincent laughed, a sharp bark of disbelief. You're telling me that quiet little thing who pours coffee at charity events locked us out of $400 million? That quiet little thing designed every system we use, every account structure, every shell company, every payment schedule. Adrian pulled out his phone and projected the Empire file onto the screen behind him. She sent me this tonight. Read it. They did, and Adrian watched the understanding dawn on their faces, watched them realize that the woman they'd barely acknowledged for 7 years had been the one actually running the show. Jesus Christ, Sarah muttered. The political payment schedule, the offshore routing protocols, the LLC cascade structures, this is doctoral-level financial engineering. Where'd she learn this? Asked Tommy Brennan, their logistics coordinator. I don't know, Adrian admitted. I never asked. You never asked? Vincent's voice rose. Your wife is apparently a financial genius, and you never bothered to find out where she learned it. She was supposed to be a trophy, Adrian snapped. Something pretty to distract from the blood. That was the arrangement. Clearly, she had a different arrangement in mind, Sarah said dryly. She leaned forward, studying the documents on the screen. This isn't amateur work. Look at the layering. Every account is protected by at least 6 degrees of separation. And the way she's structured the shells, it would take a forensic team months to untangle them. Can you untangle them? Adrian asked. Maybe, given enough time and resources. Sarah's fingers drummed on the table. But the real question is, why did she give you this? If she wanted to destroy you, why show you the blueprint? It was a good question. Adrian had been asking himself the same thing since the phone call. Alara had always been methodical, deliberate. She didn't make mistakes. She wants me to understand, he said slowly. She wants me to see exactly how powerless I am. Poetic, Marcus said, also incredibly dangerous. What else did she say? Adrian told them about the ultimatum, about David Castellano's murder, about the 2-week timeline and the falling dominoes. The room got very quiet again. You can't confess to Castellano, Vincent said finally. That's life without parole. Maybe death penalty, depending on the prosecutor. I'm aware. So what's the play? Adrian looked at each of them in turn. We find her. We get the access back. We fix this before it spirals. And if we can't find her, Tommy asked, then we make her come to us. Sarah raised an eyebrow. How? By going after the things she cares about. Does she care about anything? Marcus asked. I mean, no offense, boss, but she just torched 7 years of her life. What's she got left to lose? It was a fair point. Adrian had been mentally cataloging everything he knew about Alara, and the list was disturbingly short. She liked orchids. She drank tea instead of coffee. She volunteered at some kind of literacy nonprofit. Beyond that, his wife was a mystery wrapped in expensive cardigans and silent compliance. Except the compliance had been a performance, and he'd been too stupid to notice. Everyone cares about something, Adrian said. We just have to find out what. I'll pull her background, Marcus said. See if there's family, friends, anyone she might run to. Do it. Sarah, I want you working on those accounts. Vincent, talk to our contacts. See if anyone's heard anything about a woman moving money around. Tommy, check all the transport logs. If she moved physical assets, there'll be a trail. They nodded and started to disperse, but Adrian held up a hand. One more thing. This stays quiet. I don't want word getting out that we've been compromised. Little late for that, Vincent said. The Chicago crew is already talking. So are the Nevada guys. And once word hits the street that Adrian Voss can't make his payments, I know what happens, Adrian cut him off, which is why we're going to fix this before the sharks start circling. After they left, Adrian stood alone in the warehouse, staring at the projection of Alara's files. The detail was staggering. Every account, every contact, every vulnerability in his organization, all documented with the kind of precision that suggested years of careful observation. She'd been studying him, learning him, building a weapon designed specifically to destroy what he'd built. And he'd never noticed. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. "What?" he answered. "Mr. Voss?" The voice was unfamiliar, male, with a slight accent Adrian couldn't place. "I represent a party interested in your current situation. I'm not interested in whatever you're selling. I'm not selling anything. I'm offering information." Adrian's grip on the phone tightened. "What kind of information?" "The kind that might help you locate your wife." "Who is this?" "Let's call me a concerned observer. I have business interests that align with yours, and I'd prefer to see your organization remain stable. If you know where she is, tell me." "Information isn't free, Mr. Voss. You of all people should understand that." Adrian forced himself to breathe slowly. Every instinct screamed trap, but he couldn't afford to ignore any lead. "What do you want?" "A favor, to be specified later." "Not a chance." "Then good luck finding a woman who's clearly been planning her disappearance for years. I'm sure your resources are up to the task." The caller paused. "Or perhaps not, given your current account situation." "You've got 30 seconds to convince me this isn't a waste of my time. Your wife withdrew $740,000 in cash from 3 different banks yesterday morning. She did it using accounts you didn't know she had and a name you wouldn't recognize. She's currently staying at a property in Chester County, Pennsylvania, a farmhouse registered to a shell company that doesn't appear in any of your files. She's not hiding. She's watching, and she's waiting for you to make exactly the kind of desperate move you're contemplating right now." The detail was too specific to be a guess. "How do you know this?" "I make it my business to know things. Do we have a deal?" "I need to verify what you're telling me first." "Of course. The farmhouse is at 2847 Blackwood Road, white clapboard, red barn, about 40 acres. I suggest you visit during daylight hours. The property has excellent sightlines, and your wife strikes me as someone who'd notice approaching vehicles." The line went dead. Adrian immediately called Marcus. "I need you to check an address. 2847 Blackwood Road, Chester County, Pennsylvania." "What am I looking for?" "Property records. Who owns it, when it was purchased, any connection to Alara." "Give me 10 minutes." While he waited, Adrian pulled up satellite imagery of the address. The farmhouse was exactly as described, isolated, with clear views in all directions. The kind of place you'd choose if you wanted to see trouble coming. Marcus called back in 8 minutes. "Property is owned by something called Persephone Holdings LLC, registered in Delaware. Company was formed 6 years ago. I can't find any obvious connection to your wife, but the LLC structure is familiar. Looks like the same pattern she used in your account files." 6 years. She'd been planning this for 6 years. "Get Vincent and Tommy. We're taking a drive to Pennsylvania." "Boss, if she's expecting you, then she won't be surprised when I show up. Get the car ready." 2 hours later, Adrian sat in the back of the Mercedes as Daniel navigated country roads that got progressively narrower and darker. Vincent rode shotgun, a gun resting on his lap. Tommy was in a second car behind them, along with 2 of their more reliable enforcers. "This feels like a trap," Vincent said for the 3rd time. "Everything's a trap," Adrian replied. "The question is whether you see it coming." The farmhouse appeared around a bend in the road, exactly as the satellite images had shown. Lights glowed in the downstairs windows. A Range Rover, Alara's Range Rover, sat in the gravel driveway. "She's here," Daniel said unnecessarily. Adrian stared at the house. It looked peaceful, normal, like the kind of place people retired to when they wanted to escape the city. Not at all like the headquarters of a woman currently dismantling a criminal empire. "Wait here," he told Vincent. "If I'm not out in 20 minutes, come get me." "You're really going in there alone?" "She's my wife. She's not going to shoot me." "Your wife just stole $400 million from you. I wouldn't make assumptions about what she will or won't do." But Adrian was already getting out of the car. The gravel crunched under his feet as he walked toward the house, and he was acutely aware that anyone watching from the windows would have a clear shot. The front door was painted red, with a brass knocker in the shape of a lion's head. He knocked. The door opened almost immediately, like she'd been watching him approach. Elara stood in the doorway wearing jeans and a simple white sweater, the most casual he'd ever seen her. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She wore no makeup. Without the armor of designer clothes and perfect styling, she looked younger, softer, until you saw her eyes. "Adrian," she said calmly, "you made better time than I expected. Can I come in?" She stepped aside and he entered a house that smelled like wood smoke and lavender. The interior was nothing like their mansion. Instead of cold, modern minimalism, this place had worn hardwood floors, overstuffed furniture, books stacked on every available surface. It looked lived in, comfortable. It looked like someone's actual home. "You want coffee?" Elara asked, already walking toward the kitchen. "I want my accounts unlocked." "That's not going to happen." She poured 2 cups from a French press, added cream to one without asking if he wanted it. She still remembered how he took his coffee. "But you can have coffee while we talk." Adrian took the cup, more out of habit than desire. "How did you know I was coming?" "You're predictable. Someone offers you information about my location, you immediately drive out here without stopping to wonder why I'd make myself so easy to find." She sat down at the kitchen table, gestured for him to do the same. "The anonymous caller was my idea, by the way. I needed you to come here." "Why?" "Because you need to understand something. This isn't about money. It's not about revenge. It's about showing you what you've been taking for granted." "I never took you for granted." Elara laughed, that same soft sound from the phone call. "Adrian, you forgot my birthday 3 years running. You've never asked what I do with my days. You don't know my father's name, or where I grew up, or what I studied in college. You literally cannot remember the last conversation we had that wasn't about your schedule or social obligations." "I've been busy building an empire." "No, you've been busy playing emperor while I built the empire." She sipped her coffee, completely composed. "Every system you think you created? I designed it. Every political contact you think you cultivated? I researched them, found their weaknesses, and created the payment structures that kept them loyal. Every close call you've had with law enforcement, I made sure the evidence disappeared. If this is true, why help me at all?" "Because that was the deal. You got a beautiful wife who made you look legitimate. I got financial security and the freedom to build something nobody would look at twice." She set down her cup. A mob boss's wife working on charity projects and financial planning. Who would suspect that was a cover for anything interesting? A cover for what? For learning, for building skills, for creating an exit strategy. Elara stood and walked to a filing cabinet in the corner. She pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. "This is who I was before you. Read it." Adrian opened the folder. Inside were academic transcripts, letters of recommendation, newspaper clippings. His eyes caught on the details. Full scholarship to Wharton, summa cum laude, published papers on offshore financial structures and international banking law, offers from Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, McKinsey, and then, abruptly, the trail stopped. No graduation, no job acceptances. Just a marriage license to Adrian Voss, dated 7 years ago. "I don't understand," he said quietly. "My father was Thomas Collins. He ran debt collection for the Irish syndicates in Boston. When he got in over his head with gambling debts, he offered me as payment to his creditors." Elara's voice remained steady, clinical. "You were option 3. The other 2 were worse." Adrian looked up sharply. "You never told me this." "You never asked. You saw a quiet, educated woman who could help legitimize your operation, and you assumed I came to you willingly, gratefully even." She reclaimed the folder. "I did come willingly, but not because I wanted to be your wife, because I wanted access to your infrastructure." For what? For this. She pulled out her phone and showed him a screen. Every dollar I've locked away from you is now sitting in accounts I control. And over the next 2 weeks, I'm going to redistribute it. Redistribute it where? To the people you've exploited, the businesses you've extorted, the families you've destroyed, the communities you've bled dry for profit. She scrolled through a list of recipients. The small business owners on 5th Street who pay you protection money. The union workers whose pension fund you looted. The families of people who died because your product was contaminated or your enforcers were too violent. Adrian stared at her. You're giving away $400 million? I'm returning $400 million. There's a difference. That money's mine. That money was stolen through violence, intimidation, and corruption. I'm just correcting the accounting. Adrian stood so fast his chair fell backward. You self-righteous! I gave you everything. This house, cars, jewelry, a life most people would kill for. You gave me a cage. For the first time, Alara's composure cracked. You gave me a beautiful, expensive cage and expected me to be grateful for it. You paraded me at events like a show dog, introduced me to criminals and called them businessmen, and never once asked if this was the life I wanted. You could have left any time. Could I? How exactly? She stood to face him. With what money? What skills? You think I could just walk into a financial firm and explain the 7-year gap in my resume by saying I was helping my mob boss husband launder money? I was trapped, Adrian. The only way out was through. So you decided to destroy me. I decided to free myself. Your destruction is just a necessary step. They stood on opposite sides of the kitchen table, and Adrian realized he was looking at a stranger. This woman, sharp, angry, purposeful, bore no resemblance to the quiet wife who drifted through his mansion like a well-dressed ghost. The Castellano confession, he said. You know I can't do that. I know you won't do it, which is why the dominoes start falling tomorrow. She checked her watch. In 8 hours, Judge Harrison will announce he's recusing himself from the Delgado case and recommending a special prosecutor. In 12 hours, your shipment in Nevada will be seized by federal agents who received an anonymous tip about its exact location and contents. In 24 hours, the IRS will receive documentation about 7 years of tax fraud. You'll go down too. You're complicit in all of it. Actually, I'm not. Alara smiled. Check your files again. Every illegal transaction, every bribe, every payment, they all trace back to accounts in your name. I was very careful about that. Adrian pulled out his phone with shaking hands and opened the Empire file. She was right. Every digital signature, every wire transfer, every piece of documentation bore his credentials. You set me up, he said numbly. I protected myself. There's a difference. The feds will never believe you weren't involved. Won't they? I'm the loyal wife who finally discovered her husband's criminal activities and came forward. I have years of diary entries documenting my suspicions, my fear, my attempts to leave. I have emails to my lawyer, who exists, by the way, and knows nothing about this conversation. I have a very compelling narrative of emotional abuse and financial control. That's bullshit. Bullshit is legally irrelevant if it's well-documented bullshit. She walked to the door, opened it. You should go. Your men are getting nervous, and I'd hate for this to get violent. Adrian didn't move. What happened to you? The woman I married? Never existed. That woman was a performance. I was tired of performing. So this is who you really are? Some kind of vigilante? Robin Hood in Prada? I'm just someone who got tired of being invisible. Alara held the door open, waiting. You have 2 weeks, Adrian. Confess to Castellano's murder, or I release everything and let the justice system tear you apart. Your choice. That's not a choice. That's extortion. Welcome to powerlessness. Doesn't feel great, does it? Adrian walked to the door, stopped next to her. Up close, he could smell her perfume, something light and citrusy that she'd worn for years. Some details hadn't changed. I loved you, he said quietly. Alara's expression softened just for a moment. No, you didn't. You loved what I represented. You loved how I made you look. But you never loved me, Adrian. You never even knew me. I could have. If you'd given me the chance, I gave you 21 chances. You didn't take any of them. She closed the door in his face. Adrian stood on the porch for a long moment, then walked back to the car. Vincent took one look at his face and wisely said nothing as they pulled away. Through the rear window, Adrian watched the farmhouse recede into darkness. Light still glowed in the windows, warm and welcoming. Inside, his wife, his stranger of a wife, was probably already back to whatever she did in her new life. Planning the next domino to fall, calculating the next strike. "What now?" Vincent asked when they were back on the highway. "Now we fight back," Adrian said. "She wants war? She's got it." But even as he said it, he felt the cold certainty settling in his chest. This was a war he didn't know how to fight. Because how do you battle someone who knows every weakness in your armor? Someone who designed the armor in the first place? His phone buzzed. Marcus. "Tell me you have good news," Adrian answered. "Define good." I found Alara's background. She wasn't kidding about being a financial genius. The woman published 3 papers on international banking law before she was 23. Her professors thought she was going to revolutionize the field. Why didn't she? Because her father sold her to pay off gambling debts. I found the documentation. It's buried, but it's there. Thomas Collins owed 200 grand to some very bad people. The debt disappeared the same week you married his daughter. Adrian closed his eyes. I didn't know. Probably why she didn't tell you. Makes it hard to play the grateful wife when you're essentially bought property. Marcus paused. There's more. I tracked the Persephone Holdings, LLC. It's part of a larger network, at least 40 different shell companies, all created over the past 6 years. And they're not just holding accounts, they're running businesses. What kind of businesses? Legitimate ones. A literacy nonprofit that provides free education programs. A microloan company for women escaping abusive situations. A legal aid fund. She's been building an entire parallel empire while living in your house. How much money? Hard to say. But based on the financial flows I'm seeing, she's been skimming small amounts from your operations for years. A few thousand here, a few thousand there. Never enough to notice. But over 6 years it adds up. My estimate? She's got at least $20 million in assets outside of what she just locked away from you. $20 million. Built from nothing, while pretending to be a trophy wife who spent her days arranging flowers and planning charity events. She played me, Adrian said quietly. She played all of us, Marcus corrected. I've been working with her for 7 years, and I thought she was just some quiet, rich wife. Turns out she's smarter than everyone in that warehouse combined. That's not helping. Not trying to help. Trying to make you understand what we're up against. Marcus's voice got serious. Boss, this woman has been planning her exit for 6 years. She knows every move we're going to make before we make it. Our usual tactics, intimidation, violence, buying people off, none of that works if she's already 10 steps ahead. So what do you suggest? Honestly, consider her offer. Confess to Castellano, do your time, and at least you'll be alive when you get out. I'll be 70 years old when I get out. If I get out. Better than being dead at 64. Adrian hung up without responding. Through the car window, the Pennsylvania countryside rolled past in darkness. Somewhere behind them, Alara was probably sleeping peacefully in her farmhouse, confident in her plan. Confident in her power. She'd called him predictable. Maybe it was time to be unpredictable. Vincent, Adrian said, I need you to find someone for me. Who? Thomas Collins, Alara's father. Vincent turned in his seat. Why? Because everyone cares about something, even ghosts. Thomas Collins lived in a studio apartment above a laundromat in South Boston, the kind of place where the smell of industrial detergent seeped through the floorboards and the walls were thin enough to hear your neighbors' arguments in stereo. Vincent had tracked him down in less than 6 hours, which told Adrian everything he needed to know about how far Alara's father had fallen. The man who answered the door at 7 in the morning looked like he'd aged 100 years in the past decade. Gray stubble, yellowed eyes, hands that shook just enough to notice. He wore a bathrobe that had probably been white once and held a mug of something that smelled more like whiskey than coffee. Thomas Collins? Adrian asked. Who's asking? Your son-in-law. The recognition that flickered across Collins's face was followed immediately by fear. He tried to close the door, but Vincent's foot was already in the gap. We're not here to hurt you, Adrian said. We just want to talk about your daughter. I don't have a daughter. That's interesting. Because I'm married to her. Collins's shoulders sagged. What does she want now? What makes you think she wants anything? Because Alara doesn't do anything without wanting something. That's how I raised her. He stepped back from the door. You might as well come in. The apartment was worse inside than out. Unmade bed in the corner, dishes stacked in a sink that had probably been full for weeks, newspapers and racing forms covering every surface. The life of a man who'd given up pretending. Collins sat heavily in a chair held together with duct tape. You want a drink? It's 7 in the morning, Vincent said. Is it? Can't tell anymore. Days just kind of blur together. He took a long pull from his mug. So what did my daughter do now? Finally get tired of playing house with the mob? You could say that. Adrian remained standing, studying the man who'd sold his daughter like livestock. How much did I pay you for her? 200,000, plus forgiveness of all outstanding debts. Collins smiled, showing teeth that needed work. I got 80 grand left after the bookies took their cut. Lasted me about 18 months. And you never checked on her? Never wondered if she was okay? I figured if she wasn't okay, she'd let me know. Alara's good at letting people know when they've disappointed her. He finished his drink and immediately poured another from a bottle on the floor. She wrote me one letter after the wedding. You want to know what it said? Adrian waited. Thank you for teaching me that everyone has a price. It's been very educational. That was it. No signature, no return address, just that one sentence. Collins laughed, a wet sound that turned into coughing. My daughter learned her lessons well. What lessons? How to survive, how to plan, how to never trust anyone because everyone will sell you out eventually. He gestured around the apartment. I taught her that. Me and her mother, before the cancer took her. We showed Alara exactly what happens when you're not smart enough, not ruthless enough, not 3 steps ahead of everyone else. She's more than 3 steps ahead, Adrian said quietly. Of course she is. I used to watch her when she was a kid, solving math problems that made my head hurt, reading books about economics and finance like they were fun. She was always going to be something special. Collins's expression turned bitter. Just not special enough to save her old man. She paid off your debts. She paid off the people I owed. Never gave me a dime directly. Said if I wanted money, I could earn it like everyone else. He laughed again. My own daughter won't even spot me rent. Vincent shifted behind Adrian, probably resisting the urge to comment on what kind of father would expect his daughter to bankroll him after selling her to a crime boss. When's the last time you talked to her? Adrian asked. 3, maybe 4 years ago. She showed up here one night, wouldn't come inside. Just stood in the hallway and asked me questions. What kind of questions? About how I'd gotten in over my head, what mistakes I'd made, how I'd let the gambling control me instead of controlling it. Collins stared into his mug. I thought she was worried about ending up like me. Turns out she was studying me, trying to understand how people self-destruct so she'd know how to make it happen to someone else. The words settled in Adrian's stomach like ice. She was already planning this, even back then. Probably planning it from the day you married her. That's who Alara is. She plays the long game, always has. Collins looked up at Adrian for the first time. You love her? What? Do you love my daughter? Adrian opened his mouth, closed it. The question should have been simple, but the answer kept slipping away from him like water through his fingers. I thought I did, he finally said. But you don't know who she really is, so how could you love her? Collins nodded slowly. Yeah, that's the trap, isn't it? She shows you exactly what you want to see, and you're so grateful for the illusion that you never look deeper. You're saying she's been lying this whole time? I'm saying she's been surviving. There's a difference. He finished his drink and didn't pour another, which somehow seemed significant. You came here looking for leverage, something you can use to make her back down. But there's nothing, Mr. Voss. I'm a washed-up drunk who sold his daughter for gambling debts. You think she gives a damn what happens to me? Everyone cares about something. Not Alara. She cared once, and it nearly destroyed her. Now she's smarter than that. Collins stood, surprisingly steady for a man who'd been drinking since dawn. You want my advice? Let her go. Take whatever punishment she's got planned and count yourself lucky she's not doing worse. She's trying to put me in prison for life. Then I guess you did something worth punishing. Collins walked to the door, opened it. My daughter's the smartest person I've ever met, and the most patient. If she's been planning this for years, you've already lost. You just don't know it yet. Adrian and Vincent left the apartment in silence. The morning sun was harsh on the street, making everything look dirty and worn. Adrian felt like he'd aged 10 years in the past hour. That was useless, Vincent said once they were in the car. Was it? We got nothing. No leverage, no weakness, no way to bring her back. But Adrian was thinking about something Collins had said. She cared once, and it nearly destroyed her. Now she's smarter than that. What had Alara cared about before she learned to stop caring? His phone rang. Marcus. Please tell me you have something, Adrian answered. Judge Harrison just announced his recusal. Special prosecutor's been assigned. It's happening exactly like she said it would. Fuck. Gets worse. The Nevada shipment. Feds hit it an hour ago. They knew exactly where to look, like someone drew them a map. And I just got a call from our guy at the IRS. He says there's a filing incoming, something big enough to trigger a full audit. Adrian closed his eyes. The dominoes were falling precisely on schedule. What about the accounts? Sarah make any progress? She's been working all night. Says it might be possible to crack some of the security, but we're talking weeks, not days. And even if we get in, your wife set up some kind of dead man switch. Sarah tries to force access. The whole system dumps evidence directly to the FBI. Of course she did. Boss, I have to ask, are you considering her offer, the Castellano confession? No. Then what's the plan? Adrian watched the streets of South Boston slide past the window. Somewhere in this city, Alara had grown up, had learned that everyone had a price, had decided to never be someone's transaction again. We need to understand her, Adrian said slowly. Really understand her. Not the person she pretended to be, but who she actually is. How do we do that? By finding the one thing she still cares about. Over the next 3 days, Adrian stopped trying to fight like a crime boss and started investigating like a detective. He had Marcus pull every record he could find on Alara's life before their marriage. He interviewed her former professors at Wharton, her classmates, anyone who'd known her during those years when she was supposed to be revolutionizing finance. What he found was a ghost. She kept to herself, Dr. Patricia Chen told him over coffee in a Wharton faculty lounge. The economics professor had been one of Alara's academic advisors. Brilliant student, absolutely top of her class, but no friends, no social life that I could see, just constant work. Why? I assumed it was ambition. Now I'm not sure. Dr. Chen stirred her coffee absently. There was an incident in her 3rd year. A professor, not naming names, but he's not here anymore, made an inappropriate advance. Most students would have reported it through proper channels. Alara destroyed him. How? She documented every instance of his misconduct over 3 years. Every inappropriate comment, every time he'd shown favoritism to female students he was sleeping with, every ethics violation. Then she compiled it all into a report so thorough that the university had no choice but to fire him. Dr. Chen met Adrian's eyes. She didn't do it to protect other students. She did it because he'd made the mistake of thinking she was vulnerable. Did she tell you that? Didn't have to. I saw her face when he was escorted off campus. She looked satisfied, like checking an item off a list. Adrian found similar stories everywhere he looked. A roommate who'd tried to steal Alara's research notes ended up expelled for plagiarism. A study group that had excluded her watched as she scored top marks while they all failed. Every slight, every attempt to diminish her, answered with calculated precision. Your wife doesn't forgive, Marcus summarized when Adrian shared what he'd learned. She collects debts and waits for the right moment to collect. Then what's my debt? Wasting 7 years of her life? Treating her like furniture? Take your pick. But it felt like more than that. The amount of planning, the years of patience, the sheer scope of her revenge, it suggested something deeper than wounded pride. On the 4th day, Adrian found it. He was going through Alara's charity work, the one area of her life he'd always dismissed as pointless rich wife activities, when he noticed a pattern. All of her volunteer work centered around one organization, the Literacy Alliance, a nonprofit that provided free education programs to adults who'd never learned to read. Why would she care about literacy? He asked Marcus. Maybe she's just generous. But Adrian was already pulling the organization's records. board members, donors, volunteer schedules. And there, buried in a list of program participants from 6 years ago, he found it. Thomas Collins attended basic literacy classes for 8 months before dropping out. Alara's father couldn't read. Adrian sat back in his chair, the pieces finally clicking together. A daughter who'd been brilliant from birth, watching her father make mistake after mistake because he couldn't read contracts, couldn't understand the fine print, couldn't navigate a world built on written language. A father who'd drunk himself into debt partly from shame, partly from frustration at a world he couldn't fully access. And a daughter who'd started a literacy program to help people like him. That's what she cares about, Adrian said quietly. Not him specifically, but people like him. People who were smart enough to be more but never got the chance. How does that help us? Adrian pulled up the Literacy Alliance's website. There was a fundraising gala scheduled for Saturday night. A big event, the kind that brought out wealthy donors and local politicians. The kind of event that needed careful planning and organization. The kind of event Alara would never miss. Marcus, I need you to do something for me, and you're not going to like it. Saturday night found Adrian in a tuxedo standing outside the Belmont Hotel's grand ballroom, watching champagne-drunk donors congratulate themselves on their generosity. The Literacy Alliance Gala was in full swing, silent auction, speeches, the usual performance of charitable wealth. And somewhere inside, Alara was watching him. He'd spotted her the moment he walked in, though she'd changed her appearance. Shorter hair, different color, glasses she didn't need. She stood near the back of the room in a simple black dress, looking like just another program coordinator. But Adrian knew how she moved, how she held herself, how her eyes tracked everything without seeming to look at anything. He waited until the main speech started, then made his way across the ballroom. She saw him coming but didn't run, didn't even look surprised. I wondered if you'd figure it out, she said quietly when he reached her. Your father can't read. Couldn't. He can now. Took him 2 years, but he finished the program. She gestured at the stage where a graduate was telling her story of learning to read at age 50. That's what this is for, people who deserve a second chance. People like you? I had a first chance. I was lucky. These people never even got that. Adrian looked around the ballroom. This is what you wanted to do with your life? Before your father sold you? This is what I'm doing with my life now. What I wanted before doesn't matter anymore. It matters to me. Alara finally looked at him directly. Why are you here, Adrian, to threaten the charity? Donate a suspicious amount of money. Make a scene. To talk to you. Really talk, not through threats and ultimatums. We already talked. I gave you 2 options. You haven't taken either. Because both options end with me destroyed and you walking away clean. Not clean, free. There's a difference. She checked her watch. You have about 5 minutes before security escorts you out. I alerted them when you walked in. Then I'll make this quick. Adrian pulled out his phone and showed her a document Marcus had prepared. This is a confession. Full details of every crime I've committed in the past 30 years, including Castellano's murder. Signed and dated. Alara's eyes narrowed. What's the catch? I'll give it to the feds myself tomorrow morning. But first, I want one night. No threats, no games, no revenge plot. Just you and me, talking like 2 people who used to be married. We're still married. You know what I mean. She studied his face for a long moment. Why would I agree to that? Because you spent 6 years planning how to destroy me, but you never once asked why I treated you the way I did. You assumed you knew. Maybe you're wrong. I'm not wrong. I was there. Were you, or were you so busy building your exit strategy that you never actually looked at what you were exiting from? It was a gamble, and Adrian knew it. But he'd spent the past week studying Alara Collins, and one thing had become clear. She valued information above everything else. The chance to fill in gaps in her knowledge. To understand the complete picture. She wouldn't be able to resist. One night, she said finally, but we're not going anywhere private. And if you try anything, I upload everything I have directly to the FBI. Deal. And you're buying dinner, somewhere expensive. Obviously. They ended up at Marcello's, an Italian restaurant on the waterfront that had somehow survived 3 decades of development without losing its original character. Adrian had offered to take her anywhere. French cuisine, Japanese kaiseki, Michelin-starred fusion. But Alara had chosen this place specifically. "Why here?" he asked once they were seated in a corner booth with enough privacy to talk. "Because it's real. No pretension, no performance. Just good food made by people who care about what they do." She accepted a menu from the waiter. "Everything in our marriage was performance. I wanted one meal that wasn't." They ordered. She got the seafood risotto, he got lamb chops, and sat in silence while wine was poured and bread was delivered. The restaurant hummed with quiet conversation and clinking silverware. Through the window, boats moved across the harbor, their lights reflecting on dark water. "I didn't know about your father," Adrian said finally. "The debt, the arrangement. I thought you came to me willingly." "Would it have changed anything if you'd known?" "Yes." "How?" He thought about it. "I would have asked more questions, tried to understand what you wanted, made sure you weren't just surviving." "I was always just surviving. That's all I've ever done." "That's not true. The literacy program, the shell companies, the parallel empire you built, that's not survival. That's purpose." Alara broke a piece of bread, didn't eat it. "You want to know the first thing I did after we got married?" "What?" "I opened a bank account in my name, just checking and savings, nothing fancy. I put $50 in it from money I'd saved from my work-study job." She finally ate the bread. "For 3 months, I'd check that account every day, make sure the money was still there, that I had something that was mine, that you couldn't touch." I never would have taken your money. You took 7 years of my life. What's $50 compared to that?" The food arrived, and they ate in silence for a while. Adrian watched her enjoy the risotto, making small, satisfied sounds that he had never heard before. In 7 years of marriage, had they ever shared a meal where she actually enjoyed what she was eating? "Why didn't you just leave?" he asked. "After you'd built up enough money, enough skills. Why go through all this?" "Because leaving wouldn't change anything. You'd still be out there treating people like assets, using women like currency, destroying lives without even noticing." She set down her fork. "I needed you to understand what you'd done, what you are." "A monster?" "A person who forgot other people are people." She met his eyes. "You know what you never asked me in 7 years?" "What?" "How my day was. Not once. You'd come home from whatever violent thing you'd done, and I'd be there, and you'd just assume I'd had a nice quiet day doing whatever it is invisible wives do." She smiled sadly. "I could have told you about the microloan program I was building, or the literacy classes I was developing, or the women I was helping escape abusive situations, but you never asked." Adrian felt something crack in his chest. "I'm asking now." "Too late. We're not married anymore, not really. The papers haven't been filed." "The marriage ended the day I left. The papers are just bureaucracy." They finished dinner, and Adrian paid the check without looking at the total. As they stood to leave, Alara paused. "The confession you showed me earlier, is it real?" "Every word." "You'll actually turn yourself in?" "That's what it takes to make this right." "It won't make it right. It'll just make you imprisoned." She studied his face. "Why would you do that?" "Because you were right. About all of it. I did waste your life. I did treat you like furniture. And I can't undo any of that, but I can at least stop you from carrying the weight of destroying me." Alara was quiet for a long moment. "You think confessing will absolve you?" "I think it'll let you move on without me haunting you." "You've never haunted me, Adrian. You've barely existed in my mind at all. That's what you don't understand. I'm not doing this because I'm obsessed with you. I'm doing it because you're in the way of who I'm trying to become." The words hurt more than any threat could have. They walked out of the restaurant together, and for a moment Adrian was struck by how normal it looked. A couple leaving dinner, the man holding the door for the woman, both of them dressed nicely. Like a real marriage between real people. "I'll turn in the confession tomorrow," he said. "You can call off the rest of the dominoes." "Why would I do that?" "Because you win either way. If I confess, I'm in prison. If the dominoes fall, I'm destroyed. At least this way, you don't have to carry the weight of bringing me down." Alara looked at him with something that might have been pity. "You still don't get it. This isn't about punishing you. It's about breaking the system you represent. One crime boss goes to prison, another takes his place. But if I dismantle your entire network, show everyone exactly how it works, make it impossible for the next guy to build the same thing, that's real change." So the confession means nothing. The confession means you're finally taking responsibility. That's not nothing. She started to walk away, then stopped. For what it's worth, this was nice, the dinner, the conversation. It's the closest we've ever come to being honest with each other. Alara, wait. No more waiting.
I've been waiting for 7 years. She pulled out her phone. The next domino falls in 6 hours. Commissioner Delacroix is going to announce a task force specifically targeting your organization. Then Captain Martinez flips. Then your crew starts to fracture. By this time next week, you won't have an empire left to protect. And if I run, then you're alive but powerless, which might be the most appropriate punishment of all, watching from the outside while someone else gets to matter. She walked away into the night, and Adrian stood on the sidewalk watching her disappear. Somewhere in the city, his empire was already crumbling. His crew was probably panicking. His money was locked away. His political protection was evaporating. He pulled out his phone and called Marcus. "Yeah?" Marcus answered, sounding exhausted. "Call everyone off. No more fighting. No more trying to fix this." "What?" "She wins. Let it happen." "Boss, we can still—" "No, we can't. She's been 3 steps ahead this whole time. The only way this ends is with me in prison or dead. At least this way. I choose how it happens." He hung up and stood there, listening to the city. His city, or so he'd thought. But maybe it had never really been his. Maybe he'd just been a tenant, and Alara had been waiting patiently for the lease to expire. Adrian looked down at his phone and pulled up the confession document. One tap and it would send to the FBI. One choice, and this whole nightmare would be over. But even as his thumb hovered over the screen, he knew it wouldn't be that simple. Because Alara Collins didn't want his confession. She wanted his empire burned to ashes, and she was just getting started. The dominoes fell exactly as Alara had predicted. Commissioner Delacroix held a press conference at 9 the next morning, announcing a special task force dedicated to dismantling organized crime in the city. He named Adrian's organization specifically, cited years of corruption and violence, promised that no one would be above the law. The reporters ate it up. Adrian watched it on TV from his mansion, alone except for Daniel, who'd refused to leave despite being told 3 times that his services were no longer needed. "You should eat something," Daniel said, hovering in the doorway. "I'm not hungry." "You haven't eaten in 2 days." "I said I'm not hungry." Daniel left, and Adrian kept watching as his empire dissolved on live television. By noon, Captain Martinez had flipped, providing federal prosecutors with documentation of bribes, protection payments, and evidence tampering going back 6 years. By 2 p.m., 3 of his lieutenants had been arrested. By 4, Vincent called to say he was leaving town. "It's nothing personal," Vincent said, his voice tight with poorly concealed panic. "But my lawyer says if I stick around, I'm going down with you." "I understand." "Who, you want me to take care of anything before I go? Anyone who needs handling?" Adrian thought about it. A week ago, he would have had a list. People who'd betrayed him, people who needed to be reminded what happened when you crossed Adrian Voss. But now, sitting in his empty mansion watching his life collapse, he couldn't summon the energy to care. "Just go," he said. "Get out while you can." Vincent hung up without saying goodbye. By the time the sun set, Adrian had received 14 more calls, crew members jumping ship, political allies backing away, business associates suddenly remembering they'd never actually met him. The speed of the abandonment would have been impressive if it wasn't so predictable. Marcus was the last one standing. "The warehouse is empty," he reported at 8 p.m., calling from somewhere that sounded like a highway. "Everyone's scattered. The feds have warrants for the property, the vehicles, the accounts we didn't already lose. It's over." "Where are you?" "Heading west. I've got family in Colorado who don't ask questions." Marcus paused. "You should run too. Get out before they come for you." "I'm not running." "Boss, I'm tired, Marcus. I'm tired of fighting, tired of looking over my shoulder, tired of being what I've been. Let them come." "That's not you talking. That's depression or shock or—" "That's me finally being honest." Adrian looked around the mansion at the expensive furniture and meaningless art. "You know what's funny? I built all this to prove I mattered, that I'd climbed out of nothing and become something, but it was all sand. One good wave and it's gone. You mattered to us, to the crew. The crew that abandoned me in less than 12 hours?
Marcus didn't have an answer for that. Go to Colorado, Adrian said. Start over. Be better than I was. He hung up and sat in the silence of his mansion. Outside, the sun had set completely, turning the floor-to-ceiling windows into mirrors that showed him his own reflection. An old man in an expensive suit sitting alone in an empty house. His phone rang again. Unknown number. What? He answered. Mr. Voss. The same voice as before, the mysterious caller who'd given him Ilara's farmhouse location. I'm disappointed. I expected more fight from you. Who is this? Someone who's been watching your situation with great interest. Someone who thinks it's a shame to see a perfectly good empire go to waste. It's not going to waste. It's being systematically destroyed by my wife. Ex-wife, technically. She filed the divorce papers this morning. You'll be served tomorrow. Adrian closed his eyes. Of course she had. What do you want? He asked. To offer you an alternative. Your wife has been very thorough in her revenge, but she's made one critical mistake. What mistake? She assumed you'd fight back using the same methods that built your empire: violence, intimidation, corruption. She prepared for that version of Adrian Voss. But what if you became someone else? I don't follow. Your wife wants to destroy your organization and redistribute your wealth. Fine. Let her. But there's nothing in her plan that says you have to go down with it. The caller paused. I can make you disappear. New identity, new location, enough money to start fresh. All I ask in return is one favor, to be collected at a future date. It was the same offer as before, and Adrian's answer should have been the same. But sitting in his empty mansion, watching his empire burn, the offer had new appeal. What kind of favor? The kind that requires someone with your particular skills and lack of moral constraints. But that's a problem for future Adrian. Present Adrian just needs to decide if he wants to survive. Adrian walked to the window, looked out at his grounds. The landscaping alone cost $30,000 a year to maintain. The security system had been state-of-the-art. The whole property was designed to be a fortress, but fortresses only worked if you had an army to defend them. I need to think about it, Adrian said. You have until midnight. After that, the offer expires and you're on your own with the feds. The caller hung up. Adrian stood at the window for a long time, thinking about choices. About the moment 7 years ago when he'd agreed to marry Ilara Collins, thinking he was getting a trophy wife and gaining a strategic asset. About all the moments since then when he could have chosen differently, could have answered the phone, could have asked questions, could have seen her as something other than scenery. His phone buzzed with a text from Ilara. The federal agents will arrive at your house in approximately 4 hours. I suggest you use that time to decide who you want to be. He stared at the message, then typed back, Who did you want me to be? The response came quickly. Someone who noticed I existed. Adrian sat down on the couch and pulled up the confession document on his phone. He'd written it 3 days ago, detailing every crime he could remember. The murders, the extortion, the corruption. 30 years of violence reduced to a 40-page document. He could send it now, turn himself in, take responsibility for what he'd done. Or he could run, disappear, let someone else give him a new life. Or he could stay and fight, though he had no idea what that would look like without money, without crew, without the systems Ilara had built and then demolished. His phone rang again. Marcus. I thought you were halfway to Colorado, Adrian answered. I was. I am. But I had to tell you something first. Marcus sounded strange, his voice tight. I've been going through the files Ilara sent you, the Empire documents, and I found something. What? She made a mistake. Just one, but it's there. In the account structure for the Cayman holdings, she left a back door. Adrian sat up straighter. What kind of back door? A recovery protocol. Probably meant to be her exit strategy in case something went wrong. But if we can exploit it, we might be able to recover some of the money. Not all of it, but enough to matter. How much is enough? Maybe 20, 30 million, enough to rebuild, enough to disappear properly if you want, enough to hire lawyers who can actually fight the federal charges. Marcus paused. But we'd have to move fast. Once the Fed sees the properties tomorrow, any chance of accessing the accounts disappears. Adrian's mind raced. $20 million. It wasn't his $400 million, but it was survival money. Revenge money. enough to make Alara's perfect plan less perfect. Can you do it remotely? No, I'd need access to your secure server, the one in your study. The server that was currently in Adrian's house, which would be raided by federal agents in less than 4 hours. That's cutting it close, Adrian said. It's cutting it impossible if you're not there to help. I can walk you through the process, but you'll have to be at the computer. Adrian looked at the study door, then at his watch. 3 hours and 47 minutes until the feds arrived. Talk me through it, he said. For the next 2 hours, Adrian followed Marcus's instructions, navigating through security protocols and encryption layers that he'd never known existed. The system Alara had built was elegant, complex, and almost impossible to break. Almost. There, Marcus said finally. You should see a folder labeled Phoenix Protocol. Adrian clicked on it. Inside were account numbers, passwords, and transfer instructions. Everything needed to move money out of Alara's control and into accounts she didn't know about. Why would she leave this here? Adrian asked. Insurance, probably. She's smart enough to know that even the best plans can fail. This was her exit strategy if you'd caught on earlier, or if federal investigators had moved faster, or if any of 100 variables had gone wrong. Marcus paused. She planned for everything except you actually finding it. Adrian stared at the screen. With a few keystrokes, he could transfer $32 million into accounts Alara couldn't access, could rebuild part of what she'd destroyed, could survive. His finger hovered over the enter key. Boss, Marcus said, you still there? Yeah. So do it. Transfer the money and get out of there. You've got maybe 90 minutes before the feds show up. But Adrian was thinking about something Alara had said at dinner. This isn't about punishing you. It's about breaking the system you represent. If he took the money, he'd be proving her right. Proving that he'd learned nothing, changed nothing. That given the chance to take responsibility, he'd choose survival instead. Marcus, Adrian said slowly, what happens if I don't transfer the money? What do you mean? If I just leave it there, let her plan work, what happens? You go to prison, probably for life, given the evidence she's compiled. Why would you? Because maybe she's right. Maybe the system needs to break. You're not thinking straight. You're tired and stressed, and I'm thinking clearly for the first time in years. Adrian closed the laptop. Go to Colorado, start over, but don't become what I was. Boss, please. Adrian hung up and sat in the quiet of his study. The house felt different now, less like a fortress and more like a museum, a monument to a life that was already over. He pulled out his phone and sent a text to the unknown caller. I'm declining your offer. Whatever favor you wanted, find someone else. The response came immediately. Disappointing, but not unexpected. Good luck with what comes next. Adrian deleted the message thread, then opened a new text to Alara. I found your Phoenix protocol. I'm not using it. You win completely. He hit send, then walked to the kitchen and made himself coffee for the first time in 7 years. It was terrible. He'd forgotten to measure the grounds properly, but he drank it anyway. His phone buzzed. Alara. Why? Adrian thought about how to answer, then typed. Because you were right about all of it. I did waste your life. I did treat people like assets. And if I take the money and run, I'm just proving you right forever. So this is about ego? This is about finally choosing something that isn't about ego. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, the feds will be there in 73 minutes. I know. You'll go to prison. I know that too. Why are you telling me this? Adrian stared at his phone, trying to find words for something he'd never been good at expressing. Because in 7 years of marriage, I never once asked you what you needed. So I'm asking now. What do you need from me? The response took longer this time. When it came, it was just 2 words. The truth. About what? About why you married me. Not the strategic asset version, the real reason. Adrian sat down at the kitchen table, coffee growing cold in his hands. The real reason. He'd spent 7 years not thinking about it, but now, with less than an hour of freedom left, the truth felt important. He started typing. I married you because I was lonely, not for a person. I had plenty of people around me, but lonely for the idea of being normal, of having something that wasn't built on blood and lies.
When I met you at that charity gala, you were quiet and smart, and you looked at me like I was just another man in a tuxedo, not a crime boss.
For 5 minutes, I got to be someone else. Someone who could have a real life. I thought if I married you, I could keep that feeling. But I was too much of a coward to actually be that person, so instead I just used you as decoration, made you part of the lie instead of the truth. I'm sorry. He hit send before he could second guess it. The response came quickly. That's the first honest thing you've ever said to me. I know. It doesn't change anything. I know that too.
Another long pause. Then, there's a detail in your confession about the night you killed David Castellano. You wrote that you were alone, that you pulled the trigger yourself. But that's not true, is it? Adrian's blood went cold. How did she know that? Marcus was there, Ilara continued. He was your backup. He helped you move the body. If you confess alone, he might get away clean. But I have evidence that puts him at the scene. Don't, Adrian typed. He's loyal.
He doesn't deserve to go down for my choices. Neither did I, but here we are. What do you want? I want you to understand that loyalty is earned, not demanded. Marcus stuck with you longer than anyone else. He's still trying to help you. That means something. A pause. I won't release the evidence about Marcus, but only if you add his role to your confession. Let him turn himself in. Let him tell his own story instead of having it told for him. It was a test, Adrian realized. A final measure of whether he'd actually changed or was still trying to protect his empire, even in its death throes. He pulled up the confession document and started typing, adding details about Marcus's involvement, about Vincent's role in other crimes, about Tommy's logistics work, about every person who'd helped build his empire, whether they deserved to fall or not. When he was done, the confession was 63 pages long. He sent it to Ilara. Everyone? She asked. Everyone. No more protecting people who made the same choices I did. And you're sure? I'm not sure about anything, but I'm tired of lying. He could hear sirens in the distance now, getting closer. The feds were early, or his timing was off. Either way, his remaining freedom was measured in minutes. His phone rang. Marcus. I saw what you did, Marcus said without preamble. You threw us all under the bus. I gave you a chance to tell your own story. That's more than I gave Ilara. You selfish son of a... You're right. I am selfish. I was selfish when I built this empire, selfish when I married Ilara, selfish in every choice I made for 30 years. But this one time I'm trying not to be. Adrian walked to the window and watched headlights turn into his driveway. Turn yourself in. Tell your story. Maybe you'll get a better deal than me. I should have left you to burn. Yeah, you probably should have. Marcus hung up and Adrian set his phone on the table. The sirens were loud now, right outside. Through the window, he could see cars pulling up, federal agents emerging with weapons drawn. His phone buzzed one last time. Ilara. They're at your door. I know, I can see them. Are you scared? Adrian thought about it. Surprisingly, no. Mostly, I'm just tired. That's probably the healthiest thing I've ever heard you say. Too little, too late, right? Story of our marriage. The doorbell rang, then pounding, then a voice shouting that this was the FBI. They had a warrant. Open the door or they'd break it down. I have to go, Adrian typed. I know. For what it's worth, I am sorry about all of it. I know that too. Will you be okay after this? There was a long pause, then, I'll be free. That's all I ever wanted. The pounding got louder. Adrian stood up and walked to the front door. His hands weren't shaking, his heart wasn't racing. He just felt empty, like a building after everyone had moved out. He opened the door. 12 federal agents, all with weapons drawn, all shouting different commands. Get on the ground, show us your hands, don't move. Move now. The chaos of law enforcement trying to assert control over a situation that was already controlled. Adrian raised his hands slowly. My name is Adrian Voss, he said calmly. I'm unarmed. I'm surrendering voluntarily, and I have a confession to make. The agent in charge, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and no nonsense in her expression, lowered her weapon slightly. Get on your knees, she said, hands behind your head. Adrian complied. The marble floor was cold against his knees. Hands grabbed him, pulled his arms back. snapped handcuffs around his wrists. Someone was reading him his rights. The familiar words he'd heard in 100 movies, but never thought would apply to him. They hauled him to his feet and started walking him toward the door. As they passed through his mansion, Adrian looked at everything he was leaving behind, the art that cost more than it was worth, the furniture no one would ever sit in again, the perfect empty life he'd built. At the door, he turned back for one last look. The house was already dark, like it had never been lived in at all. They put him in a car and drove him downtown. Through the window, Adrian watched his city pass by. The neighborhoods he'd controlled, the businesses that had paid him tribute, the streets where his word had been law. All of it continuing without him, indifferent to his fall. At the federal building, they processed him like any other criminal. Fingerprints, photos, personal items confiscated. The agents were professional, efficient, neither cruel nor kind, just doing their job. They put him in an interrogation room and left him alone. Adrian sat at the metal table and waited. The room smelled like industrial cleaner and fear. Every surface was designed to be uncomfortable, to make you want to leave. But he had nowhere to go. The door opened. Agent Sarah Reeves, the woman who'd arrested him, entered with a laptop and a cup of coffee. "Mr. Voss," she said, sitting across from him, "you said you wanted to confess?" "I have a document. It's on my phone. 63 pages detailing crimes I've committed over the past 30 years. That's very thorough of you. My wife helped with the organization." Something flickered across Reeves's face. Maybe surprise, maybe amusement. "Your wife helped you confess to multiple murders?" "My ex-wife. And yes, she's very good at organization." Reeves pulled up the document on her laptop, started scrolling. Her expression grew more serious with each page. "This is detailed," she said finally. "Names, dates, specific locations. You understand that if even half of this is accurate, you're looking at life in prison?" "I understand." "Then why confess? Why not fight? Hire expensive lawyers, tie us up in court for years?" "Because I'm tired of being who I was, and because someone showed me what it looks like to actually take responsibility for your choices." "Your ex-wife?" "My ex-wife." Reeves leaned back in her chair, studying him. "You know what's interesting? We've been investigating you for 3 years. We had evidence of financial crimes, corruption, probably enough to build a RICO case. But nothing concrete on the violent crimes. Nothing we could prove beyond reasonable doubt." She gestured at the laptop. "This confession fills in all those gaps. It's almost like someone laid out a roadmap." "Someone did." "Your ex-wife?" "She's very thorough. She's also claiming she's a victim. Says she had no knowledge of your criminal activities, that she's cooperating with our investigation." Reeves pulled up another file. "She's provided documentation of 7 years of emotional abuse, financial control, and manipulation. She's painted herself as a battered wife who finally found the courage to come forward." Adrian smiled despite himself. "That's a good story. Is it true?" "Parts of it. I did control her financially. I did ignore her. But she wasn't a victim in the way you think. She was playing a longer game than anyone realized." You're saying she manipulated you?" "I'm saying we manipulated each other. I used her to legitimize my empire. She used me to build an exit strategy. We were both lying from day one." Adrian looked at the two-way mirror, wondering if Alara was watching. "The difference is, she was better at it." Reeves closed her laptop. "I'm going to be honest with you, Mr. Voss. This confession is a prosecutor's dream. With your cooperation, we can close dozens of cases. We can arrest dozens of people. We can dismantle an entire criminal organization. That's what my ex-wife wanted. But I have to tell you, once you sign this, there's no taking it back. No deals, no reduced sentences, no witness protection. You'll go to prison and you'll die there." "I know. You're 64 years old. You could have maybe 10 good years left. You could run, disappear, live them somewhere nice." She pushed the laptop aside. "Why throw that away?" Adrian thought about the question, about the mysterious caller's offer, about the Phoenix Protocol money he could have taken, about all the choices that would have let him survive. "Because survival isn't the same as living," he said finally. "I've been surviving for 30 years. Maybe it's time to do something real." Reeves studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay. Let's go through this page by page. Start with David Castellano." For the next 6 hours, Adrian told the truth. Every murder, every crime, every choice that had built his empire of blood and fear. The words came easier than he expected, like a weight being lifted with each sentence. Somewhere around 3 a.m., Reeves took a break. Adrian sat alone in the interrogation room, exhausted but strangely calm. His phone, which they'd given back for the confession document, buzzed with a text from a number he didn't recognize. "You did the right thing." Adrian stared at it. The number wasn't Alara's, but he knew it was from her. Probably a burner phone, untraceable. He typed back, "Will I ever see you again?" The response came quickly. "No, that's not who we are to each other anymore." What are we? Two people who made bad choices and are finally dealing with the consequences. I hope you find whatever you were looking for. I already did. Freedom. The message thread went dead, the number already disconnected. Adrian sat there holding his phone, thinking about a woman he'd been married to for 7 years but never really known. A woman who'd been invisible in plain sight, building an empire of her own while he played king of his. Reeves came back with fresh coffee, and they continued. More crimes, more details, more truth than Adrian had told in his entire life. By the time the sun rose, it was done. "Sign here," Reeves said, pointing to the final page of the official confession. Adrian signed his name. The signature looked shaky, old, like it belonged to someone else. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now you go to holding, then arraignment, then trial, though I suspect you'll plead guilty, then sentencing, then prison." She stood up. "You'll probably be at FCI Hazleton. It's maximum security, not pleasant, but you'll be safe there. Protective custody, given who you are." Sounds wonderful. It's not meant to be. They led him out of the interrogation room and down a hallway. Through a window, Adrian could see the city waking up. People going to work, starting their days, living lives that had nothing to do with crime empires or revenge plots or confessions in the early morning. Normal lives. Lives he'd never have. But maybe, Adrian thought as they took him to his cell, maybe that was okay. Maybe some people didn't get normal. Maybe some people got exactly what they deserved. The cell door closed with a sound that was final and absolute. And Adrian Voss, who'd been a king for 30 years, sat down on a concrete bench and waited for whatever came next. The trial lasted 3 weeks, but the outcome was never in doubt. Adrian pled guilty to all charges, 17 counts of murder, 43 counts of racketeering, money laundering, bribery, witness tampering, and a dozen other crimes that read like a catalog of everything wrong with the justice system. His lawyer, a public defender named Robert Chen, who looked fresh out of law school, had tried to negotiate a plea deal. "They're offering life with possibility of parole after 30 years, Chen had said during one of their meetings in the holding cell. "I'll be 94, Adrian replied. "Better than life without parole, which is what you'll get if we don't take this." "Then I'll get life without parole." Chen had stared at him like he was insane. Maybe he was. But Adrian had made his choice, and he was tired of negotiating. The courtroom was packed for sentencing. Media in the back rows, sketch artists furiously drawing, prosecutors looking satisfied with themselves. Adrian sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit that smelled like industrial detergent and defeat, and listened as the judge read out his sentence. Life in prison without possibility of parole. Consecutive sentences for the murders, meaning even if one conviction was overturned, the others would keep him locked up forever. The judge used words like heinous and remorseless and danger to society. She wasn't wrong. Adrian stood when they told him to stand, sat when they told him to sit, and felt nothing but a strange relief when they led him out of the courtroom. It was over. Finally, completely over. In the hallway outside, reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Voss, do you have any remorse? What about the families of your victims? Is it true your wife turned you in?" Adrian kept walking, head down, flanked by marshals. But at the last question, he stopped. "My ex-wife didn't turn me in," he said clearly. "I turned myself in. She just made sure I understood why I needed to." Then they took him away before anyone could ask what he meant. The transfer to FCI Hazleton took 6 hours in a bus with barred windows and seats designed for maximum discomfort. Adrian sat next to a kid who couldn't have been more than 25, covered in gang tattoos and radiating the kind of nervous energy that got people killed in prison. First time? The kid asked. First time getting caught, Adrian said. What you in for? Murder, you? Armed robbery, got 15 years. The kid laughed, high and brittle. 15 fucking years for taking $3,000 from a convenience store. Meanwhile, these white-collar guys steal millions and get country club prisons. I'm getting maximum security, Adrian said. Does that make you feel better? The kid looked at him properly for the first time, taking in the age, the expensive watch they'd somehow forgotten to confiscate, the way Adrian sat with his back straight despite the uncomfortable seat. You're that guy, the kid said slowly. The mob boss whose wife screwed him over. I saw you on the news. Ex-wife. And she didn't screw me over. I screwed myself over. She just held up a mirror. That's deep, man. That's reality. They rode in silence after that. Through the windows, Adrian watched the landscape change from city to suburbs to rural nothing. Trees and fields and small towns that probably had no idea a bus full of criminals was passing through their quiet lives. FCI. Hazleton looked exactly like a prison should look. Concrete and razor wire, guard towers, and hopelessness. They processed Adrian like they'd processed thousands before him. Strip search, delousing, medical exam, psychological evaluation, everything designed to strip away whatever dignity you'd arrived with. You're 64, the intake officer noted, reading from Adrian's file. You have high blood pressure, early-stage arthritis, and you're on medication for anxiety. That correct? I wasn't on medication for anxiety before this week. Welcome to prison. Everyone's anxious. The officer stamped something, filed something else. You're going to C block, protective custody. Given your background and the publicity around your case, general population would be a death sentence. How comforting. Wasn't meant to be comforting, just factual. The officer looked up. You got any family you want us to contact? Someone we should notify in case of emergency? Adrian thought about it. His parents were long dead. No siblings, no children, no friends who weren't currently facing their own legal troubles thanks to his confession. No, he said. There's no one. The cell in C block was 8 by 10 feet. Concrete walls, metal bed frame with a thin mattress, toilet and sink combo that looked like it had been installed in 1970. A single window near the ceiling showed a square of sky. Adrian's cellmate was a man named Eugene Porter, mid-50s, completely bald, with the kind of weathered face that came from hard living. He was reading a paperback Western when Adrian arrived. You're the new fish, Eugene said without looking up. The mob guy, right? Former mob guy. No such thing as former in here. You are what you did. Eugene marked his page and set the book down. I'm Eugene. I killed my business partner 20 years ago over a contract dispute. Been here ever since. Adrian, I know who you are. Whole prison knows. You're the guy whose wife destroyed him. Eugene smiled. That true? She really take down your whole organization? Ex-wife. And yes. Damn, that's cold. Eugene lay back on his bed, hands behind his head. My wife divorced me after the trial. Took the kids, moved to Oregon, changed their names. Haven't heard from them in 15 years. But at least she didn't actively destroy me. She just abandoned me. I think I prefer destruction, Adrian said. At least it's honest. You're a weird dude. So I've been told. The days in prison developed a rhythm that was both monotonous and oppressive. Wake at 6, breakfast in the common area, back to the cell, lunch, recreation hour in the yard, dinner, lockdown. Every day exactly the same, stretching out into an infinite future of sameness. Adrian spent most of his time reading. The prison library was surprisingly well-stocked, and he worked his way through books he'd never made time for before. Philosophy, history, fiction that explored what it meant to be human. In his old life, he'd read newspapers and financial reports. In prison, he read everything else. Eugene noticed. You're different from the other guys in here, he said one evening, watching Adrian finish a biography of Marcus Aurelius. How so? You're not angry. Everyone in here is angry. At the cops, at the judge, at the system, at themselves. But you just read your books and do your time. Like you're fine with being here. I'm not fine with it, but I deserved it. Adrian closed the book. There's a difference between accepting consequences and being happy about them. Most guys can't accept consequences. That's why they're in here. I'm in here because I spent 30 years refusing to accept consequences. This is just the bill coming due.
Eugene was quiet for a moment. You really believe that? That you deserve this? I killed 17 people, Eugene. Probably more, if I count the ones I ordered but didn't pull the trigger on myself. I destroyed families, corrupted public officials, sold poison to people who were already drowning. So yeah, I believe I deserve this. That's the most depressing thing I've ever heard. Or the most honest. 3 months into his sentence, Adrian got his first visitor. He assumed it was his lawyer with some paperwork, but when the guard led him to the visiting room, he found someone unexpected. Marcus Chen sat on the other side of the plexiglass partition, looking thinner and older than he had just months ago. He wore civilian clothes and no handcuffs, which meant he wasn't incarcerated yet. Adrian picked up the phone on his side of the glass. Marcus did the same. "You look like shit," Marcus said. "Prison's not a spa. What are you doing here?" "I turned myself in, like you told me to." Marcus's smile was bitter. "Got myself a lawyer, negotiated a plea deal. 15 years for racketeering and accessory to murder. Could have been worse. Could have been better if you'd run. Yeah, well, turned out I couldn't live with myself. Funny how that works." Marcus leaned forward. "I came to tell you something about your wife." "Ex-wife." "Ex-wife. Whatever. You need to know what she's been doing." Adrian felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What has she been doing?" "Redistributing your money, just like she said, but not the way you think." Marcus pulled out a tablet, showed Adrian the screen through the glass. "She's not just giving it away. She's building something." The screen showed news articles, charity filings, incorporation documents. Adrian scanned them quickly, his brain automatically processing the information. The Voss Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping families affected by organized crime, providing legal aid, counseling, financial assistance. Run by an anonymous board of directors, but funded with millions from Adrian's former empire. Second Chance Literacy, an expansion of the Literacy Alliance providing free education programs in 20 cities. Funded by $8 million from offshore accounts Adrian had spent years filling. The Phoenix Project, a microloan program for women escaping abusive situations. Named after the protocol Alara had built as her escape plan, now repurposed to help others escape their own prisons. "She's using everything you built for violence to create something that actually helps people," Marcus said. "Every dollar you made from suffering, she's redirecting toward healing. It's like she's trying to balance the cosmic scales or something." Adrian stared at the screen, feeling something complex and painful in his chest. "There's more," Marcus continued. "She testified before Congress last month about financial systems that enable organized crime, about how money laundering works, about corruption in local government. She's basically become an expert witness on everything we did." "Is she in trouble? Legal trouble?" "No, somehow she's completely clean. The feds bought her story about being a victim, or maybe they just decided she's more useful as a witness than as a defendant. Either way, she's walking free while we rot." Marcus laughed. "You have to admire it. She played the game better than any of us. She always did. You know what the crazy part is? I think she actually believes in what she's doing. The foundation, the charity work. It's not just cover. She's actually trying to fix the damage we caused." Adrian looked at the image of Alara on one of the news articles. She was testifying before some committee, looking professional and composed. Her hair was different, shorter. She wore glasses, but her expression was the same one he'd seen at the farmhouse. Determined, focused, free. "Good for her," he said quietly. "Good for her? She destroyed you. She destroyed what I built. There's a difference." Adrian handed the phone back through the slot. "I'm glad she's doing something meaningful. Someone should." Marcus stared at him. "You really have lost it." "Maybe. Or maybe I finally found it." They sat in silence for a moment, two men on opposite sides of glass who'd once ruled a criminal empire together. "I'm sorry," Marcus said finally, "for not seeing what we were becoming, for not questioning whether what we were doing was worth it." "Me too." "You think we can be better? In here, I mean?" Adrian thought about it, about Eugene's question months ago, about the books he'd been reading, about the person he'd been versus the person he might still become. "I think we can try," he said. "That's all anyone can do." The visit ended, and they led Adrian back to his cell. Eugene was reading another Western, this one with a particularly lurid cover featuring cowboys and six-shooters. "How'd it go?" Eugene asked. "My ex-wife is saving the world with my money." "That's ironic. That's karma." 6 months became a year became 2. Adrian settled into the rhythm of prison life, becoming one of the quiet old men who did their time without drama. He attended the prison's education programs, got his GED in teaching, started helping younger inmates with their reading. "You're good at this," one of the education coordinators told him during a review. "You should consider making it official. We could use literacy tutors. I'm a convicted murderer serving life without parole. Who's going to want me as a tutor? People who need to learn to read don't generally care about your criminal record. They just care if you can help them." So Adrian became a tutor, started teaching basic literacy to inmates who'd never learned, helped them write letters to family, read legal documents, navigate a world built on written language. It wasn't redemption. He knew that. 17 people were still dead because of him. Families were still broken. Communities were still damaged. But it was something. Some small attempt to put more into the world than he'd taken out. On a Tuesday afternoon in his 3rd year of incarceration, a guard came to get him during recreation hour. "You got a visitor?" the guard said. "Legal visit." Adrian followed him to the private visiting room, assuming it was his public defender with some routine paperwork. Instead, he found a woman in her 30s wearing an expensive suit and carrying a leather briefcase. "Mr. Voss," she said, standing to shake his hand. "My name is Jennifer Martinez. I'm an attorney with the Innocence Project." Adrian sat down slowly. "I'm not innocent." "I know. That's not why I'm here." She pulled out a file. "I'm here because your ex-wife hired me." The words took a moment to register. "Alara hired you?" "She's funding a new initiative. Legal representation for people who were caught in the crossfire of your organization. People who got arrested for crimes they committed under duress or threat. People who were forced into your operation and never found a way out." Martinez opened the file. "Your confession mentioned several individuals who were coerced into criminal activity. We're reviewing those cases." "Why would Alara pay for that?" "Because she understands that not everyone who committed crimes is equally culpable. Some people were victims of your organization too." Martinez pulled out a list. "She's asked me to interview you about each of these cases, to understand the context, the coercion, whether any of these people deserve a second look." Adrian scanned the list. He recognized most of the names, people who'd worked for him, often because they had no choice, people who'd made one bad decision and found themselves trapped in his web. "She wants me to help free people?" "She wants you to help identify people who deserve another chance." Martinez met his eyes. "Your ex-wife is very specific about justice. She believes you deserve to be here, but she also believes that not everyone connected to your organization deserves the same fate." Over the next 6 months, Adrian worked with Martinez, going through case after case. Some people he couldn't help. They'd made their choices freely, committed their crimes willingly. But others, the ones who'd been threatened or coerced or trapped, those cases he documented thoroughly. A single mother who'd laundered money because Adrian's crew threatened her children. A young man who'd transported drugs because his family owed Adrian money they couldn't repay. A woman who'd kept books because refusing meant her husband would be killed. One by one, Martinez built cases for appeal. Some succeeded, some failed. But slowly, carefully, pieces of Adrian's empire of coercion started to crack in reverse, freeing people who'd been collateral damage. "Your ex-wife is funding all of this?" Adrian asked during one of their meetings. "Every penny. Legal fees, investigation costs, expert witnesses. She's committed millions to the project." Martinez closed her laptop. "She told me something interesting when I asked why she was doing this." "What did she say?" "She said that destroying you wasn't enough. She needed to dismantle the system that created you. And part of that system was the idea that everyone who commits a crime is equally guilty." Martinez looked at him. "She's trying to create nuance in a system that usually only sees black and white." "That sounds like Alara." "You still care about her." It wasn't a question, but Adrian answered anyway. I care about who she is now, who she's become. I never knew that person when we were married. Do you regret that? I regret everything about how I treated her, but I can't change it, so all I can do is try to be better in here than I was out there. Martinez packed up her files. For what it's worth, your cooperation has helped 12 people so far. 12 people who are out of prison because you told the truth about their situations. That doesn't balance the scales. No, but it's something. After she left, Adrian sat in his cell and thought about Alara. About a woman he'd married for strategic reasons, ignored for 7 years, and finally understood far too late. She was out there somewhere, living a life he'd never be part of, doing work he'd never see, becoming someone he'd never really know. But she was free, and maybe that was enough. 4 years into his sentence, Eugene died. Heart attack during breakfast, sudden and final. One moment he was complaining about the powdered eggs, the next he was on the floor, gone. They gave Adrian a new cellmate, a kid barely 20 who'd killed someone in a gang dispute and was looking at 30 years. The kid was angry at everything, exactly like Eugene had said all inmates were. This is bullshit, the kid kept saying. 30 years for one mistake, one fucking mistake. How'd it happen? Adrian asked. Guy disrespected me in front of my crew. I couldn't let that stand, so I handled it. The kid's hands shook. I didn't even mean to kill him, just meant to hurt him. But he went down wrong, hit his head, and now I'm here for 3 decades. You make it sound like an accident. It was an accident. But you chose to hurt him. That wasn't an accident. Adrian put down his book. I spent 30 years making choices and calling them business, calling them necessary, calling them anything but what they were, choices to hurt people. It took losing everything for me to understand that. So what, I'm supposed to just accept this? You're supposed to take responsibility for it. That's different from acceptance. The kid was quiet for a long time. You really believe that makes a difference? Taking responsibility? I think it's the only thing that makes a difference. Adrian picked his book back up. Everything else is just noise. On his 5th anniversary in prison, Adrian received a letter. It came in a plain envelope with no return address, forwarded through so many channels that tracing it would have been impossible. Inside was a single page, handwritten. Adrian, I don't know if you'll receive this or if you'll care if you do, but I wanted you to know that the Foundation has helped 247 families so far. The literacy program has taught 1,832 adults to read. The legal project has freed 31 people who were coerced into your organization. These numbers don't erase what was done. Nothing can do that. But they represent people who have a chance now, people who might not have to make the choices we made. I don't forgive you. I'm not sure I ever will. But I understand you better than I did. And I think maybe you understand yourself better too. I hope you find whatever version of peace is available to someone in your position. I hope you use your time to become someone worth being. I won't write again. This isn't that kind of story. But I wanted you to know that your confession, your cooperation, your choice to take responsibility, it mattered. Not enough to undo the harm, but enough to create some good. Be better than you were. E. Adrian read the letter 3 times, then folded it carefully and put it in the small box where he kept his few possessions. Some books, some letters from Marcus, a photo of his parents from before everything went wrong. He didn't write back. She'd said she wouldn't write again, and he respected that. This wasn't a reconciliation story. It wasn't even really a redemption story. It was just a story about 2 people who'd made terrible choices and were now trying, in their own ways, to make better ones. That night, Adrian dreamed about the farmhouse in Pennsylvania, about Alara standing in the doorway, looking younger and softer and finally free. In the dream, she smiled at him, then closed the door gently, not slamming it, not making a scene, just closing a chapter that had needed to close for a long time. He woke up in his cell, Eugene's bed still empty, the new kid snoring in the bunk below. Through the high window, he could see a square of sky turning from black to gray with approaching dawn. Another day. Another chance to be slightly better than yesterday. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. 7 years into his sentence, Adrian got word that Marcus had been released early for good behavior. 15 years reduced to 7 with time served and cooperation credits. The news came through the prison grapevine, confirmed later by a letter from Marcus himself. I'm out.
Marcus wrote, working at a community center in Denver, teaching financial literacy to people who need it. Turns out accounting skills transfer, even when you got them doing illegal things. Your ex-wife connected me with the job. She said everyone deserves a chance to be useful. I don't know if I believe that yet. Most days I wake up and remember the things we did, and I can't imagine how I get to just walk around free while you're in there. But I'm trying to be the person who deserved that early release instead of the person who helped build an empire of suffering. Take care of yourself. M. Adrian wrote back, be better than we were. That's all anyone can ask. The years continued to pass. Adrian's hair went from silver to white. His arthritis got worse. His blood pressure required more medication. He became one of the old-timers, the guys who'd been in so long they'd forgotten what the outside world smelled like. But he kept teaching, kept helping inmates learn to read, learn to write, learn to navigate a world that had left them behind. Some of them were grateful, some were hostile. All of them needed help. Why do you do this? One of his students asked during a session. The kid was 22, covered in tattoos, functionally illiterate, despite 12 years of public education. Because I spent 30 years taking from people, Adrian said. This is my attempt to give something back. You really think teaching me to read makes up for killing people? No, but it's better than doing nothing. The kid thought about that. My mom used to say something like that you couldn't undo bad things, but you could decide to do better going forward. Your mom was smart. Yeah, I should have listened to her. The kid went back to his workbook, sounding out words with painful concentration. Adrian watched him and thought about all the mothers who'd given good advice their children hadn't followed, including, probably, his own mother, who died when he was too young to remember her wisdom. On a cold morning in his 10th year of incarceration, a guard came to his cell during breakfast. Voss, you got a visitor. Legal room. Adrian followed, assuming it was Martinez with another case review. Instead, he found Thomas Collins sitting on the other side of the plexiglass. Alara's father looked better than the last time Adrian had seen him. Cleaner, more sober, like someone who'd finally stopped running from himself. Mr. Collins, Adrian said, picking up the phone. Mr. Voss. Collins's hand shook slightly as he held his own phone. I wanted to thank you. For what? For turning yourself in. For telling the truth about what you did. For not dragging my daughter down with you. Collins's eyes were clearer than they'd been in that sad apartment. She told me what you did. How you could have blamed her, could have made her complicit, but you took responsibility instead. That's what I should have done from the beginning. Most people never do it at all. Collins leaned forward. I've been sober for 2 years, going to meetings, working a job, trying to be someone my daughter wouldn't be ashamed to know. And I wanted to tell you that your choice helped me make mine. How? Because if a man who built an empire of violence can take responsibility, then a drunk who sold his daughter can too. You showed me it was possible. Collins smiled, sad and hopeful. Alara and I are talking again. Not often, and it's not easy. But we're trying, and I have you to thank for that, in a weird way. I'm glad you're sober. I'm glad you're not dead, which is what would have happened if you'd run, right? Someone would have found you eventually. Probably. Then you did the smart thing, the hard thing. Collins stood to leave, then paused. My daughter is happy now, really happy. I thought you should know that. After he left, Adrian sat in the visiting room for a long time, thinking about happiness, about whether he'd ever really been happy in his old life, or just powerful and mistaking one for the other. The guard eventually came to take him back to his cell. Years blurred together. Adrian's 70th birthday passed quietly, then 75. His health deteriorated slowly but inevitably. Diabetes, heart problems, the slow decay that comes from aging in a concrete box. But his mind stayed sharp. He read thousands of books, taught hundreds of students, corresponded with Marcus, who'd gotten married and had a daughter, and was apparently living the kind of normal life that seemed impossible for men like them. On his 80th birthday, the warden called him to the office. Voss, you've been here 16 years. In all that time, you haven't had a single disciplinary action. You've helped create one of the most successful literacy programs in the federal prison system. You've cooperated with every investigation, helped exonerate 37 people who were coerced into criminal activity. The warden folded his hands. I've recommended you for compassionate release. Adrian stared at him. I'm serving life without parole. You're also 80 years old with advanced diabetes and heart disease. You're not a threat to society anymore. You're just an old man dying slowly in a prison cell. The warden pulled out a file. The board will review your case in 6 months. If approved, you'll be released to a hospice facility to live out whatever time you have left. Why would you do this? Because I believe in justice, not cruelty. You've served 16 years. You'll probably be dead in less than 2. What's the point of keeping you here? Adrian thought about it. About dying free versus dying in a cell. About seeing the sky without bars. About breathing air that didn't smell like institutional cleaning products and despair. What happens if I refuse? He asked. The warden blinked. Why would you refuse? Because this is where I belong. This is my consequence. Mr. Voss, I'm offering you a chance to die with some dignity. I lost the right to dignity when I killed my first person. Adrian stood slowly, his joints protesting. Keep your compassionate release. I'll finish my time here. But the warden submitted the paperwork anyway. 6 months later, despite Adrian's objections, the board approved his release. On a Tuesday morning, they gave him civilian clothes that hung loose on his frame, handed him $73 in gate money, and walked him to the front entrance. You sure about this? The guard asked. You could stay. We'd let you stay. I know. Where will you go? Adrian looked at the gate, at the world beyond the razor wire. 16 years since he'd been on the other side of that fence. The world had changed. Technology had evolved. He'd become obsolete in every way that mattered. I don't know, he said honestly. They opened the gate. Adrian walked through, and the sound of it closing behind him felt wrong. He'd expected relief or fear or something. Instead, he just felt empty. A car was waiting in the parking lot. When the driver's door opened, Adrian's breath caught. Thomas Collins stepped out, looking old but healthy, sober and steady. Figured you could use a ride, Collins said. How did you know I was getting out? Your warden contacted your ex-wife. She contacted me, said someone should be here when you walked out. Collins opened the passenger door. I owe you that much. They drove in silence for a while. The world outside rushed past, cars that ran on electricity, buildings that hadn't existed 16 years ago, technology Adrian couldn't begin to understand. Where are we going? Adrian finally asked. Hospice facility about 30 miles from here. Place called Riverside. My daughter arranged it, paid for everything. Said you deserve to die somewhere better than prison. I don't deserve anything from her. Maybe not, but she's giving it anyway. Collins glanced at him. She's different now, softer in some ways, harder in others, but good, really good. They pulled up to a building that looked more like a nice apartment complex than a medical facility. Large windows, garden areas, the kind of place designed to make death as comfortable as possible. This is me, Adrian said. This is you. Collins put the car in park. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Turning yourself in. Taking responsibility. It's more than most people manage. It was less than I owed. Maybe. But it was something. Adrian got out of the car and stood there, 80 years old and dying, looking at a building where he'd spend his last days. It wasn't what he'd imagined for his ending, but then nothing about the past 16 years had been what he'd imagined. Mr. Voss? A nurse had come out to greet him. We've been expecting you. Let's get you settled. That night, lying in a bed that was softer than anything he'd slept on in 16 years, Adrian stared at the ceiling and thought about the journey from that hotel room with Isabella to this hospice bed. About 21 missed calls that had changed everything. About a woman who'd been invisible until she chose to be seen. His phone, a basic model the hospice had provided, buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I hope you find peace in whatever time you have left. No signature, no name. But Adrian knew who it was from. He typed back slowly, his arthritic fingers struggling with the small keys. I hope you've already found yours. The response came an hour later. I have. I finally have. Then the number disconnected, and Adrian knew he'd never hear from Alara Collins again. He died 3 months later on a Tuesday afternoon with sun streaming through the window.
No one was with him except the nurse who checked his vitals and noted the time of death.
No funeral was planned. No mourners would gather. Adrian Voss had entered the world alone, and he left it alone, and in some ways that felt appropriate. But before he died, he did one last thing. He wrote letters, dozens of them, to every person his confession had helped free, to every family his organization had damaged, to everyone he'd hurt in 30 years of violence. Not asking for forgiveness, just acknowledging the harm, taking responsibility one final time. The letters went out in batches, delivered by the hospice staff after he died. Most went unanswered. Some recipients threw them away unopened. A few wrote back with anger or grief. But one person, a woman whose husband Adrian had killed 20 years earlier, sent a response that the hospice director forwarded to Adrian's estate. "I don't forgive you. I'll never forgive you. But I'm glad you finally told the truth. It won't bring my husband back, but at least I know what happened to him. At least I got that much." It wasn't redemption. It wasn't absolution. But it was acknowledgement. And sometimes that was all that was possible. Somewhere in another city, Elora Collins sat in her office at the Voss Foundation and heard about Adrian's death from her lawyer. She felt something complex and sad, like closing a book she'd never particularly enjoyed but had needed to finish. "Are you okay?" Jennifer Martinez asked. "I'm fine. We weren't those people to each other anymore. We hadn't been for a long time. Still, 16 years of your life. 7 years of marriage, 16 years of aftermath. But yes." Elora looked out her window at the city below, at the life she'd built from the ashes of her old one. "I'm okay." That night, she went home to her small apartment, nothing like the mansion she'd left, but it was hers in a way that mansion never had been. She made tea, sat on her couch, and let herself remember the woman she'd been. Quiet, invisible, trapped. Then she remembered the woman she'd become. Free. And she smiled. Miles away in a cemetery with no headstone and no marker, they buried what was left of Adrian Voss in a plot purchased by the state. No ceremony, no eulogy, just earth covering earth. But in prisons across the country, inmates who'd learned to read from him would carry his lessons forward. People he'd helped exonerate would live lives they might not have had. Families affected by his crimes would have access to resources his foundation provided. It didn't balance the scales. Nothing could do that. But it was something. And sometimes, in a world built on choices and consequences, something was all you got. The story of Adrian and Elora Voss ended the way it had to end, with him in the ground and her in the light, both of them finally free from the empire they'd built together. One empire of violence, one empire of silence, both demolished to make room for something better. 21 calls, 21 chances to choose differently. He'd missed everyone, but in the end, he'd finally learned what she'd been trying to teach him all along, that power was an illusion, that control was temporary, and that the only thing that lasted was the choice to take responsibility for the harm you'd caused. It was a hard lesson, an expensive lesson, a lesson that cost him everything. But it was the only lesson that mattered, and somewhere in the silence that followed his death, in the quiet spaces between memory and moving forward, that lesson echoed like the ghost of a phone ringing 21 times in an empty room. Unanswered. But finally understood.